I'm Tim Quilty, the Liberal Democrats member for Northern Victoria in the Victorian Upper House. If you've been following me, you may already know that last week I got suspended from Parliament in an extraordinary attack on hundreds of years of parliamentary tradition and on Victorian democracy itself. Last week a motion was put forward by the government to force MPs to provide evidence that they had been vaccinated. I made a stand against the Andrews government by refusing to comply with the requirement that I reveal my vaccination status. I've made no secret of the fact that I'm a supporter of vaccines. What I do not support is compulsion. Medical decisions need to be made voluntarily. I will not support mandatory vaccination, and forcing people to reveal confidential medical information in order to just live an ordinary life is plain wrong. I was disappointed to see that only 3 other MPs in the Legislative Council voted against this motion, one of them being my Liberal Democrats colleague David Limbrick. We both stated openly that we would not be party to this dangerous overreach of state power. We voiced our support for all those Victorians who have taken the vaccine under threat and for those who continue to refuse it, despite the consequences. The majority of MPs in the upper house are vaccinated, David and myself included. But the 2 of us refuse to be party to this process by showing our vaccine passports. The result being that I'm not allowed into Parliament until February next year. I am pro-vaccine, but I'm also pro-choice. I believe it should be up to the individual to make decisions for themselves, even when I do not agree with the choices. Nobody should be forced to make a medical decision against their wishes, which is what the Andrews government is doing with its decree that all employees in Victoria must be vaccinated. Even when all Victorians are vaccinated, Dan Andrews won't restore freedoms to those who choose not to be vaccinated. This freedom is not his to grant, nor to take away. But Mr Andrews has long since given up any pretense of giving a toss about our rights. The current state of emergency is due to expire on December 16. It was extended 9 months ago and, although it has been renewed on a monthly basis ever since, these midlife extensions are just a simple box-ticking exercise which does not need approval from Parliament. But all that ends in December. On the 16th, all CHO directives end and they lose the power to enforce the vaccine mandates. However, the Premier is talking about how he will continue to persecute the unvaccinated well into 2022. That means the government has a secret plan to push through legislation to grant themselves further emergency powers. Nobody's been allowed to see this legislation, although it must be written already, but it will presumably give them permanent powers that do not require ongoing review by the Parliament. You might even wonder why the media is not asking about this. The new secret permanent pandemic powers bill will of course sail through the lower house, because the government controls that utterly. In the upper house, however, the government doesn't necessarily have the numbers to push the secret legislation over the line without a fight. Or at least they didn't until they expelled 3 members of Parliament who would have voted against it. Although I'm now sitting in the naughty corner, I'm still allowed to take part in the majority of activities in the upper house. I will be zooming into the Parliament, which means I'll still be able to make speeches and ask questions of the government. However, none of the suspended MPs are allowed to vote. This, of course, is very convenient for the government. It suits them very well to have both Liberal Democrats MPs kicked out of the democratic process. Suspiciously, our suspension ends automatically in February, after the new secret legislation will have passed through Parliament. Now, I have no idea what kind of medical miracle will make it safe to bring us back into Parliament then in February, but by that point, they'll have no need to exclude me. I'm very much aware that my refusal to comply with the rules means I'll miss out on voting against the new government legislation. And I've had hundreds of messages, ranging from polite requests to, well, let's say less polite requests, urging us to return to the chamber and vote. It is something David and I have discussed at great length. We believe that right now we can have a greater impact by standing outside the Parliament protesting the government's appalling behaviour than we can sitting inside and being ignored. However, we are very much aware of our responsibilities as elected representatives. We have promised to keep fighting the government, and this suspension will do nothing to change that. We will continue fighting to allow the voices of Victorians to be heard.